Greetings, fellow travelers, vagrants, explorers, wildlanders, and welcome to episode 64 of the Retro Wildlands. My name is Nomad, and this is my gaming podcast where I like to share my thoughts and experiences with a video game that I've discovered or rediscovered while roaming the gaming wildlands. Thank you very much for tuning into the show today. Our expedition into the gaming wildlands has made it through 2024, and now that we're in the new year, thought it would be a great time to look back and reflect on the journey a little bit. It's been a crazy busy year for me, both behind and away from the microphone. However, in a world where we are all constantly moving at a mile a minute, I think we need to take Ferris Bueller's advice once in a while.
I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
So, in the spirit of stopping to look around once in a while, I wanted to talk about some of the best games I played in 2024 and rank them, top 10 style. If it is not evident, I love video games. Ever since I was little, I've always felt a pull towards games for one reason or another. As I've gotten older, you would think that I would trade in my love for video games for something else. There was a point 5 or 6 years ago when I was promoted to a leadership position at my day job that I figured I would hang it all up and put my efforts into climbing that corporate ladder. And while I do strive to learn and improve my professional skills still to this day, the passion I had for it when I started that journey kind of faded over time. Don't get me wrong, I'm very thankful for my job, and I absolutely put the time in to get to where I am today, but I've always had a passion for gaming that transcended more than just a hobby, and as an adult, I've come to have more of an appreciation for them. Video games to me are an art form. They are made by talented individuals with a passion and a vision to create something for others to enjoy. You can certainly make an argument about the state of AAA gaming as of late, but at the end of the day, games can be and mean a lot of things to different people. You can tell amazing stories, challenge people in unique ways, and make you experience things that you may not have been able to otherwise. There's also the social aspect of playing games that you can't ignore either. Whether you're playing a game with someone over the internet, or in the same room as you, or you get together with someone to discuss a single-player experience you both had. Games bring people together in fantastic ways. And because of all this and more, gaming will always be a passion of mine, and instead of just celebrating it in passing like I used to, now I choose to put it on full display, and I make no apologies for it. So, with that said, I want to talk to you all today about the games that really made an impression on me this past year with the old-fashioned top 10 list. And to spice things up, I put a call out to the Retro Wildlands community over on our social media pages in an effort to give anyone who wanted to highlight their favorite games played in 2024 a chance to shine. So I will be sprinkling in those comments as we go today. Now, before we get moving into the list, allow me to briefly set the table. First, this is my top 10 video games that I played and completed in 2024, not necessarily games that were released in 2024. While a decent amount of games were released this past year, it's not often I play the latest and greatest releases unless it's something I absolutely have to have immediately. My backlog is a monster, threatening to consume all at this point, so at the risk of not being able to talk to people about the newest releases in real time, I'd rather just kick back and play some older games. Anyway, and to clarify what I mean by completed, that means I completed the game through the game's main story and saw the end credits. I did go on to achieve 100% completion on several of these games by getting all of the in-game achievements or getting that coveted platinum trophy though. Second thing to specify is that I'm including all games that I've played and completed in 2024, even games that I completed for the podcast. I mean, it still is a game after all. And finally, I'm ranking these games based on how much I enjoyed these games. I am not ranking them based on which game is better over the others. Also, it should go without saying, but this is my personal list with my own personal feelings and thoughts behind them. I'm sure if you made your own top 10 list of your favorite games completed in 2024, your list would be very different from mine, so do not get all bent out of shape if I slot a game lower or higher than you think it should be. It's all done for fun, so I think we're going to have a little bit of it today. Okay, I think that's enough setting the table. Pretty short and sweet. It is time to eat, my friends. Let's start ranking my top games played in 2024. Number 10. Number 10 on my list of favorite games I played in 2024 is a game I was not expecting to enjoy as much as I did, but I found myself pleasantly surprised by it and very thankful I put my time into it. And that is a little game called Cat Quest. This indie action RPG was released back in 2017. Developed by the Gentle Bros and published by P-Cube, you are a cat that sets off on a grand adventure to save your sister from the clutches of evil. I remember when I was younger and I would go to the video store with my parents to rent a game for the weekend. When I was little, I had no idea what games were good, and oftentimes I would grab something based solely off the box art. I'm sure some of you listening have had to experience that, right? Well, that is sort of how I got my hands on Cat Quest. I saw it at my local gaming store, the box art caught my eye. There was a warrior cat in a suit of armor holding a sword. Perfect, that is all I needed to see. I grabbed it and purchased it knowing nothing about this game. I think, now that I'm looking back, I mostly did it just to be funny since my wife was with me. I remember seeing the box and turning to her and going, "Sweetheart, look, it has a kitty on the box with a sword!" All Justine could do was roll her eyes, but I took that game home anyway, and once I started playing, I was pretty impressed. So much so that I decided to do a video review of the game on our YouTube channel, and I posted a small podcast episode about the game that you can find in our archives. All cat puns and jokes aside though, I was pretty impressed with this game, and I think you should look into it. It's mainly a button masher of sorts with RPG elements, but the simplicity and charm is what won me over in the end. Battling enemies was fun, and I enjoyed leveling up and getting new gear to outfit my character. The game did get a little repetitive at times, and the dialogue made me cringe more than once, but it was the perfect shut my brain off and play sort of experience. So much so that I bought the game again on the PlayStation 4 and got a shiny platinum trophy for my collection. Cat Quest is not a groundbreaking game, but of the indie games that I've played this past year, I honestly had a fantastic time with it. Even if my dogs weren't exactly thrilled that I was playing a video game with cats. Number 9. Number 9 on my list is Super Mario Wonder. Released in October of 2023, I grabbed Nintendo's latest platformer starring Mario and his pals a little while after the game launched. I was playing something on my Nintendo Switch pretty consistently up to that point, and I was starting to get the itch to move over to more first-party titles. I don't know what it was, but I was completely in awe of Wonder's gameplay when it was being advertised before release. I am a little ashamed to admit it, but I don't have very many Mario games under my belt, so Mario Wonder seemed like a great game to pick up. especially since me, my wife, and the kids occasionally have been playing Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. So I figured this game pickup would please everyone. Ultimately, we never did make a ton of time to play Wonder together, but when I went on my annual work trip for my day job, I took it with me and beat the game in a span of about a week, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I had a great time with the dynamic level design and the colorful artwork. Each stage was so unique, but even more so when you collect the level's Wonder Flower, and the stage changes in some unique and creative ways. The visuals were so striking, almost as if Mario got into Luigi's batch of special brownies. The atmosphere was always charming, and the music just took me away on one of those clouds with the smiley faces on them. I always wanted to just sink time into a Mario side-scroller, and I hadn't really done that since I was a kid, and Super Mario Wonder absolutely scratched that itch for me. What kept me engaged was collecting those purple flower coins across each level, which you could use to buy things and unlock these standee items that you could place in the world for other players to find and interact with. Once the game was complete, I didn't really feel a pull to go back and unlock or find everything, and that's fine. The game did exactly what I wanted it to do. It gave me a nice, easygoing Mario experience where every level was something new and exciting. And at the end of the day, it was a solid, well put together video game, and that is more than good enough for me. Before we move on, let's check out one of the comments that I received from the community. Over on our threads page, Aaron from the SuperPod Saga chimed in with his favorite game from last year. He said, "I think my favorite game that I've played in 2024 is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. That game is perfect from beginning to end and never got annoying or frustrating. The way you upgrade your copy abilities by using different collectibles gained from completing side missions actually made me want to 100% the game." This is a great pick, Aaron. I've heard tons of great things about Kirby and the Forgotten Land. In 2025, I mean to put Kirby on the map for me, as I have, sorry to say this, never played a Kirby game before. But anytime I see Kirby and the Forgotten Land in the wild, I almost grab it each time. But the way that you describe it though, Aaron, you might have pushed me over the edge next time I see it. Although, I think this game is the first actual 3D iteration of Kirby, if I'm not mistaken, so I might start with Return to Dreamland, just to go back in time a little bit further. We'll just have to see what the new year brings. Number 8. Number 8 on my list of favorite games I've played in 2024 was a game I was curious about but had no real intentions of playing. That is, until I got it from my wife and watched her play it. And that was Hogwarts Legacy for the PS5. Now, I am not really a Harry Potter fan. I've never read any of the books, and I've only seen the movies in parts and pieces at a time. But I have to admit, the Wizarding World has always been fascinating to me. Justine doesn't really play video games all that much, but Hogwarts sank its hooks into her deep. I loved watching her play, and it was fun seeing her grow along with her character. There were times where she would get stuck on a hard boss battle or have to go through a cave with spiders in it, so she would ask me to get her through those tough spots. As I played those small sections for her, I really started to like the game. The combat was really fun, and I liked learning new spells and finding different ways to juggle and dispatch enemies, all while dodging out of the way of incoming enemy spells or deflecting them at the very last second. Even though the game had the lure of the world on full display, I will say I wasn't all that interested in the game's story though. When I finally decided to make my own character and play along with Justine, I was more interested in completing challenges, finding hidden treasures, and fulfilling side quests. There was a lot to do in this game as well, and I had to complete everything, which was actually made very easy thanks to how the game tracks quests and collectibles. That right there really made the game for me because I always felt like my time was never wasted. While the game made it very easy to track quests and all that, I still had to earn everything I was working towards, which made it all that much more rewarding. And while I did give up on finding some of the collectibles scattered around Hogwarts itself, because, let's face it, that place is frickin' huge, I had a genuinely good time anytime I sat down with the game. Looking back, I can absolutely see why it was so well received. And it was made by people who really cared for the universe and characters within it. For me, though, the best part about the game was learning and using the cursed dark arts in battle. I learned the right combination of the right skills that damage to enemies would result in being them cursed, and then when I would fire off the killing curse, any enemy who was already cursed would perish at the same time. There was nothing more satisfying than killing 6 enemy wizards all at once. Even if you are not a Harry Potter fan, I think you should check this game out. But seeing as how this game has already sold over 30 million copies, maybe you already have. Before moving on to my next favorite game, our next community comment comes from Curtis over on our Facebook page. Curtis had this to share. For this year, my favorites have been Brotato, a bullet hell style game where you play as one of several styles of potato that kind of looks like an egg, and kill aliens until the timer runs out. Ni no Kuno, an old JRPG/monster collection game from the PlayStation 3 era. TMNT Splinter Fate, a Hades-style game featuring the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Also of note, I ran a total of 10 indie games, all at the same time, for a solid month, in all capital letters, just because I wanted to see how many games I could fit onto 3 computer screens without any slowdown. First and foremost, Curtis, while I think you're absolutely nuts for balancing that many games all at once just to see how many you could, I absolutely commend the commitment, my friend. As far as your games go, you've got a solid list right there. Brotato keeps catching my eye, and I think I'm going to pull the trigger at some point. I mean, the premise speaks for itself, right? And it's funny you bring up Splintered Fate. I'll always love me a good Turtles game, and from all the praise that I've heard about Hades, I am very interested in giving this one a try. I'm still eagerly awaiting the Turtles game supposedly in development that centers around the Last Ronin storyline. If you, Curtis, or anyone listening is a Ninja Turtles fan of any degree, I urge you to check out The Last Ronin. It was, without a doubt, the best, most mature Turtle story I have ever read. Number 7. Number 7 on my list is a game I probably wouldn't have made the time to play if not for the podcast. And that game is Gunstar Heroes on the Sega Genesis. I've told the story before, but I was mostly a Nintendo kid growing up before transitioning over to the PlayStation. While I did have some access to a Genesis growing up, I didn't play very many games on it. Hell, I was not at all familiar with the Genesis's library outside of Sonic the Hedgehog and Mortal Kombat. Oh, and Shaq Fu is in there somewhere. But when I started to really look into the Genesis when I got older, Gunstar Heroes just kept popping up on people's lists of games that I needed to try for the system. Someone told me the game was a lot like Contra, and after that, it was one of those say no more sort of scenarios. This run-and-gun shooter was amazing right from the word go. I remember the action being so overwhelming the first time I popped the game in. My first thought was, how in the hell does the Genesis keep up with everything that is happening on screen? Enemies are coming in from all sides, there's shit flying around all over the screen. It was absolute madness. But soon, I got used to the way the game handled, and once I got a grasp on how the weapon system worked, it was lights out, baby. For the uninitiated, you can pick up several weapon power-ups, a homing shot, a lightning blaster, a flamethrower, and a machine gun. You can carry two at the same time and switch between the two of them on the fly, but where the game really shined was when you combined the two weapons you had to make something unique. Or you could combine the same weapon twice for a more powerful version. How about a flamethrower with homing capabilities? Or, better yet, a machine gun that shoots lightning? That's what made the game so fun to play for me, and while certain weapons and combinations were seemingly better than others, your experience and how you played changed a bit depending on what weapon you decided to wield. The best part about this game was the ability to play couch co-op with your sibling, cousin, or best pal. I never got the chance to play this game with a friend, but I can only imagine how fun it would be to run through this game with someone and revel in all of the destruction, all while the Genesis itself ran the game without missing a beat. If you have not played Gunstar Heroes before and action-packed run-and-gun shooters are your thing, you have got to give this game a try. Speaking of shooters, Gene from Caps Off Gaming let me know what their favorite game of 2024 was over on our Retro Wildlands Instagram page. Gene said, "My fave and a sleeper is Squirrel with a Gun. Sometimes with all the serious plots in games nowadays, it feels good to play some dumb fun. Word up." I am very anxious to play this game one day, and I'm glad you brought this one up. When I first saw previews for this game, I was immediately sold. And honestly, it's for the same reason that you just mentioned. Sometimes you need a simple game with a simple premise, and how simpler can you get by playing a squirrel who carries a gun? I mean, come on! That's why games like Goat Simulator or Untitled Goose Game are so popular. Simple ideas, awesome execution. I did hear Squirrel with a Gun is a little rough around the edges here and there, but that's okay. I will be trying this one out soon enough. Number 6. I'm sure someone is going to think this next game should be higher on my list, and maybe they're right, but the number 6 slot is still a solid place to slot The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. I feel like I was, and still am, the last person on the planet to complete Breath of the Wild since it originally came out in March of 2017. I completed this game after 50 hours or so back in early 2024, and, well, all I can really say is, wow. I don't really know what I can say about the game that hasn't already been said. I generally like open world games more often than I don't, so I knew I was going to enjoy this game once I decided to put the time into it. It was very easy to just get lost in the world, and I always found myself finding something new every single time I jumped into play. I loved how traversing the game world worked, and that made me enjoy looking for new shrines and solving puzzles within that world. Some were really simple, and others were definitely head-scratchers, but I loved how the game just gives you the tools, and it's up to you to use them to figure out how to progress using the rules the game has laid out for you. There was never just one way to solve a problem, and I always loved that about my experience. I made my way through the game's main story at my own pace, which was really nice, and when I finally decided it was time to do battle with and defeat Ganon and see the game's ending, I was more than satisfied, even if I hadn't found everything the game had to offer. Though I could absolutely see myself spending hundreds of hours in this game world. So yeah, I'll keep this one short just because this game has been talked to death all over the place. I do eventually want to play Tears of the Kingdom one day, but for now, I am pretty content with my time in Hyrule even if I didn't find everything. Oh, and for the record, I did find over 300 Korok seeds on my own in my playthrough. And for the record, there is no way I am going back and finding them all just so I can be gifted a golden piece of shit. Yes, that is an actual thing, go look it up. Since we just talked a little Legend of Zelda, our next community post feels perfect right here. Kurt, over on our Facebook page, didn't leave a long-winded comment, he just left his top 2024 game. Zelda, A Link to the Past. Kurt, this put a smile on my face for two reasons. One, this game is fantastic and I am so glad you were able to play it this past year. And second, it reminds me of how many times that I've played this game over the years, only to never finish it until I absolutely needed to for this podcast. But in all seriousness, A Link to the Past is one of the greats for a reason, and it still holds up remarkably well today. Even though our hero doesn't speak throughout his journey, you can see and experience his rise from lowly kid to heroic knight, and by the time you finish the game, you've ascended along with Link. That'll forever be my absolute favorite part about this amazing game. Number 5. Number 5 on my list of favorite games that I've played in 2024 is another game I might not have gone back to if not for this podcast, if I'm being 100% honest. But holy crap, I am glad I did. Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo is another game that really doesn't need an introduction or an explanation for me explaining what this game is. It's just pure gold, plain and simple. While I love me a good Metroidvania-style game, I don't really gravitate towards them all that much. When I first started the Retro Wildlands podcast, I ended up playing Metroid Zero Mission, and I had an amazing experience with that, so I knew I had to keep going down the Metroid rabbit hole. As far as Super Metroid goes, I like it for all the usual reasons. For starters, I love the atmosphere, and I loved how the game made me feel as I was exploring the planet Zebes. Exploring the world and learning about the game's many enemies and how they operated was fun, and eventually I learned and adapted to the world as I explored it further. Skilled players could sequence break the game and do things somewhat out of order if they knew the right things to do, and this wasn't a bad thing. It gave players willing to push their abilities to their limits a great reward. The big thing for me, though, was how the game made me feel each time I sat down to play it. I was always eager to explore more of the planet, find a new power-up or ability, and use that to explore and discover even more as I grew in power and ability. I love games that start you off with almost nothing, and you earn your powers and abilities as you go to become a more seasoned player. But it went far beyond just finding something new or learning how to do something you couldn't before. It was about how you use those skills and develop them, making them more a part of you as a player than just a skill to deploy whenever you needed it. All of that together made Super Metroid a fantastic experience for me, and it absolutely lives up to the idea that it is one of the very best on the Super Nintendo and a staple for the genre. I absolutely want to continue my adventures in the Metroid universe, and Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance might be the next one. But I also have Metroid Dread for the Switch sitting over there on my shelf as well, so we'll see where I end up with the series. Super Metroid is another game where I feel like I am the last person on the planet to have played and completed it, but I am so glad to finally say that I have done it this past year. Our next comment comes from Poppy the Keaton, who reached out over on our Blue Sky page. Here's what Poppy had to say with regards to their favorite game played in 2024. Beyond Shadowgate on Steam and GOG. I've waited 30 years for a proper sequel to Shadowgate, and I finally got one. It was made by fans with input from the creator, and it felt great. Classic point-and-click, over-the-top deaths, great puzzles, and a continuation of the story. Keaton, you have absolutely caught my attention with this title. After being hopelessly lost in the world of King's Quest V when I was younger, I never really found much joy in classic point-and-click style adventures, and I don't really know why. But taking a look at this on Steam, it's easy to see that there is a lot of love for this game and a lot of passion went into it. The graphics look superb, and the design is very eye-catching. I think I'll end up throwing this one on my wish list and grab it if I catch it on a sale. Plus, with the added amenities over the NES original, like quick travel, I think it might be enough for me to try something new. If that does happen, I will absolutely let you know. Number 4. The next game on the list is probably the most random thing I expected all year, and god damn, I am so glad I found this game. Number 4 on my list is an indie run-and-gun shooter called Iron Meat. Released at the end of September in 2024, Iron Meat is a run-and-gun shooter that takes heavy inspiration from Contra, so that right there should tell you why I decided to grab it. Developed by Retroware, this game just checked all the boxes for me. Smooth as silk run-and-gun style gameplay with snappy, snare drum-tight controls? Check. Multiple power-ups and ways to kill your enemies? Check. Amazing pixel art graphics that are both eye-catching and eye-popping? Check. Badass metal soundtrack to go into battle to and a bonus retro soundtrack? Double check. This game is the complete package for me, and I had a blast playing this game well after I completed everything the game had to offer. In this game, you play as an unnamed soldier who works to repel the Iron Meat, an interdimensional biomass from the moon that has made its way to Earth, infecting humans and inanimate objects as it works to consume everything. If you've played any of the old school Contra games, especially Contra 3 The Alien Wars, you will be right at home with the gameplay here. You can scale your difficulty up or down, but even the normal difficulty in this game can be pretty hard, and that is a very good thing. One of my favorite things to do in run-and-gun shooters is find that flow state where I can just tune the world around me out and zero in on what's happening on screen. And you'll need to find this flow state if you want to survive against the meat, as you'll be attacked by multiple enemies at once while dodging them and their incoming fire. The bosses at the end of each stage are absolutely fantastic, as each of them are unique and provide an interesting challenge. Just like old school shooters, you have to learn the enemy's patterns and adapt. You get what you put into this game, and the more time you spend with it, the better you get as a player, which in turn makes the experience that much more rewarding. And god damn, this soundtrack is straight fire. I've been finished with this game for a while now, and I am still listening to the soundtrack over on Spotify. It is the perfect soundtrack for this game, and honestly, it is the thing that keeps me engaged long after I'm tired of playing this game. So yeah, Iron Meat was my sleeper hit this year, and I am so glad I was able to get my hands on a physical copy of the game. Oh, and did I mention there's couch co-op? And there's also unlockable skins to change things up. If you are even a remote fan of run-and-gun shooters, please do yourself a favor and at least look this game up. And if you're anything like me, all it's gonna take is one look, and you'll feel the call to grab your gun and do battle with the meat. Before we move on to the top 3, let's check out another member of the community's comment. This one comes from Nathan from our Retro Wildlands Facebook page. For their favorite games played in 2024, Nathan said, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI, Resident Evil Remakes 4, 3, and 2. As far as retro, they played the Resident Evil series in order along with Code Veronica. Oh man, just reading off that list puts a huge smile on my face. I think I've made it pretty well known that I am a big Resident Evil fan, so seeing all this RE love makes my heart swell up with happiness. I'm slowly going back again to replay all the classic Resident Evil games myself, and I made it a point to cover them all on the podcast already. There will be more Resident Evil on the show, just not sure specifically what and when, but we'll see. And even though I still have many more games in the series to go, I always perk up at the sound of Final Fantasy. I did try Rebirth this past year, and while I didn't dislike it or anything, I just wasn't ready to sit and commit to over 100 hours of gameplay. I do really want to play that game, though. And it wants me to play it. I can see it waving at me over on the shelf over there. And shortly after getting a PlayStation 5, I also grabbed Final Fantasy XVI as well. That is also sitting over there on the shelf. I'm excited to try 16 specifically, and I might play it before I play Rebirth. Although I've heard some people don't particularly care about 16, which makes me want to try it even more so I can form my own opinion. But I assumed you liked it, Nathan, or else it wouldn't have been on your list, so that's awesome. At the end of the day, it sounds like you had one hell of a 2024, my friend. You ate very well, that is for sure. Number 3. My number 3 favorite game that I played in 2024 was one that I finished the day before I started writing this script at the tail end of 24, and I am so glad I made the time to sit down with this amazing game. Released on October 7th of 2024, the Silent Hill 2 remake is one of those games I absolutely did not ask for, but now that I've played it, I am so glad we got it. I played the original Silent Hill 2 when I was younger and even did a podcast episode about it a while back, highlighting my general feelings on the original. Silent Hill 2 is a horror game masterpiece for many good reasons, so when they announced a remake, I was a little skeptical. But to my absolute surprise, I think they absolutely nailed it, and Bloober Team, the developers, should absolutely be commended. Last week, my wife ended up going out of town to her father's for a few days, leaving me alone with just the dogs. I decided I wanted to try and play this game before the end of the year, so for those days after work, I popped the game in and made camp in my living room. I'd shut off all the lights and toss on a pair of headphones, and I dove headfirst into this world, and my God, I was hooked from start to finish. The one thing they absolutely preserved from the original was the amazing atmosphere, and I could not help but be impressed with the visuals and the amazing sound design. I mean, the sound design was so good that I would often have to take my headphones off just to make sure the sound that I just heard wasn't in my actual home. Several times I would find myself just stopping and listening to the world around me. Who was that whispering? Was that a monster just now? Or was it something else? I was also worried when they announced the remake that the over-the-shoulder view would make combat encounters a little too easy and take away from the idea that the main character was just a regular dude and not a trained government agent. But to my surprise, while combat was very fun and snappy, they still made your character an everyman, and I would often find myself going into combat thinking I was going to lay waste to a monster, only to have my character swing his weapon like I probably would in real life. Which is clumsily. It really made me think about combat, and if it was even worth engaging in a fight, or if I should just turn tail and run. But the biggest thing I wanted the developers to do was retain what made the story of the original Silent Hill 2 so great, and they did that and more. With some expanded character moments, I was hooked on the story of the game all over again, and the game's epic conclusion hit me just as hard as it did way back in the day, even if I knew it was coming. The Silent Hill 2 remake is a game that really didn't need to happen, but again, I am very glad that it did. Not only because I got to experience a very, very well-built game using modern technology and technique, but now more people will be able to partake in this game's awesome experience. Just be sure that if you do it like I did. Lights off and headphones on. You'll absolutely thank yourself later. Well, if you survive, that is. There were several times where I wasn't overly scared, but just the constant strain of being on edge was honestly exhausting, to the point that I had to take a break every half hour or so. Which, now that I think about it, just makes me love this game even more. Speaking of a game that I just absolutely love and adore, Resi Claire Redfield reached out over on our Facebook page to tell us their favorite game played in 24 by simply saying Dino Crisis. Dino Crisis is a fantastic game and one of my absolute favorites. I mean, come on, it's Resident Evil with dinosaurs. While I hope the day comes that we do get a remake for this PlayStation classic, Dino Crisis, as it exists today, is still a fantastic survival horror experience. Not only is the concept amazing, but I love how the developers continued to push the PlayStation to its limits with 3D environments and how the game had multiple paths based on decisions you made. The game itself was a little too heavy on the puzzle aspect of things for my taste, but that never stopped me from enjoying it. It's still very thrilling dodging raptors, only to have them follow you from room to room. I'm very glad you were able to partake in Dino Crisis this past year, Claire. I, for one, will never forget that game's awesome experience. Number 2. Number 2 on my list of favorite games played in 2024 is a game I wish I wouldn't have taken so damn long to play, but I am glad to say that I have finally played it. Final Fantasy IX will go down as one of the most memorable games that I have played this past year, but more than that, it has become one of my favorite games of all time. I don't really think I need to justify the why behind that. Those that have partaken in this journey probably already know. This game is full of some great characters, some awesome moments, a fun gameplay loop, and a story that explores themes and ideas in a very creative and impactful way. As I've gotten older, I've come to really value games, books, and movies that tell an interesting story and have characters that experience meaningful and thoughtful development. Final Fantasy IX has this in spades, as many of the characters you meet have interesting and sometimes relatable character arcs. Main character Zidane is initially a carefree and charming thief who matures as the story goes on, discovering the importance of friendship and sacrifice. Garnet is the sheltered princess of Alexandria who learns to balance her duties with her personal wants and beliefs, gaining confidence as she goes. Adalbert Steiner begins the game as a loyal, rule-abiding knight who slowly evolves into a staunch protector, not just because it's his duty, but because he learns compassion and discovers that there's much more than just blindly following orders. And there's even everyone's favorite, Vivi, a young black mage who sees and experiences the world through the eyes of a child. He struggles with his origins and oftentimes has difficulty grasping things about life and his purpose. Soon, though, he grows to learn the value of life and what it means to live it, which ultimately translates into the overarching theme of the entire game. It all comes together beautifully, and I find myself thinking about this game from time to time. When I finished the game, it all stuck with me for quite a while afterwards. Now, that's not to say I enjoyed every single thing about this game. While I did play on the Switch and had access to some of those quality of life improvements like the ability to speed up time or turn off random encounters, combat in this game was often very slow and clunky. Not every character was all that well written. I'm looking at you, Amaranth. And the overall pacing of the game was very slow in some parts, and those are some things that are hard for me to ignore. The game itself also looked pretty bad when I played it on the Switch with it docked and blown up on my big screen. But in the grand scheme, these are minor gripes. Final Fantasy IX is an exceptional game with an exceptional experience waiting to be had. And any game that made me smile and almost shed literal tears of joy by the end automatically gets my seal of approval. Okay, we're almost at my number one favorite game played in 2024, but before we get there, I wanted to go through the rest of our community comments and make sure everyone who submitted comments could get them read on the show. From our Instagram page, we had Aimless Gaming Screenshots who chimed in and said, "My favorite game of the year was Astrobot. Such a fun and memorable 3D platformer. I'm so excited to see where this franchise goes from here. Live Alive, or Live Alive, is a close second for me. I played it very early on in the year, and I still think about it almost weekly. I highly recommend it for anyone who hasn't given it a go." These are some great games, my friend. Astrobot is more than likely going to be the next physical game that I get my hands on. It looks like a fantastic time, and it's one hell of a love letter to Sony and its history. Personally, I played and finished Astro's Playroom, which came with the PlayStation 5 console when I got my hands on it, and I was completely in love with the gameplay experience that game had to offer, and I fell in love with the overall charm. And speaking of Live Alive, or however the hell you say it, I do own that one physically on the Switch already, and I'm excited to give that one a try myself soon. I was lucky enough to find it on clearance at our local Target, so I still have it brand new, and I got it for a steal. It looks like a fantastic RPG, and if it's on your list, I'm sure that means I am in for a treat. Speaking of Astrobot, the List Off podcast also called out Astrobot in their comment over on our Instagram page. They said, "It's gotta be Astrobot for me. It's just so darn fun and is such a perfect celebration of PlayStation's history." Honestly, that's what I think I'm most looking forward to, being a self-proclaimed PlayStation fanboy. I've seen some images of how they chose to honor their history, and it really excites me seeing how they do it. It's not in a way that makes you feel like you have to go out and buy the brand or anything. It's the perfect homage to what came before with regards to the consoles themselves, Sony's intellectual properties, and even the games that happen to be on one or more of the consoles in general. That's the sort of thing that really resonates with me. And the fact that Astrobot just looks very, very fun to play. Heading back to Facebook for our final two comments, next up is Uriah, who had a pretty extensive list of favorite games played in 24. Uriah said, "It's been a good year. Some of my faves include Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Stellar Blade, Romancing Saga 2 Remake, Metaphor ReFantazio, Yakuza Infinite Wealth, Dragon Quest III HD Remake, Neo Fantasian, among others." Another awesome pile of games, and it sounds like you ate pretty good this past year as well. Metaphor ReFantazio is a game that took me by surprise. It seemed to drop out of nowhere near the end of the year, but once I learned that it was an RPG developed by Studio Zero and Atlas, I knew it was going to be a banger. In all honesty, I don't really have much interest in this game just because I don't really have the time to commit to it that it requires, but I would love to experience this game one day. The Yakuza series is another series that I really want to try to find time to dabble in as well. I have no idea what the hell these games are even about, but anytime I see gameplay, I tend to stop and watch. The same goes for Stellar Blade. I ended up picking up Stellar Blade physically on a Black Friday sale, so that one is coming up in 2025 for me for sure. Aside from the obvious visual appeal of the game, the combat looks incredible. All in all, Uriah, great list of games, and I am glad that you got to enjoy these fantastic titles this past year. And our last comment of the episode goes to my pal Lindsay from the YouTube channel LL Cool Games. With regards to my favorite games played in 2024, Lindsay started off by saying, Sea of Stars had better be on there. Between Sea of Stars and Balatro, I had an incredible, unexpected year in gaming, heading into the new year with high expectations. Balatro is another fantastic game that I haven't made time for yet either, although that is by choice, because I feel like if I do play it, I'm just going to get hooked on it like everybody else, and then what little free time and self-control that I do have will be gone. But seriously though, I do need to and intend to try it. I mean, taking a step back, it's the perfect concept for a video game. A poker-themed roguelike deck builder. I have not heard a single bad thing about this game, so you bet your ass that I'll be on this one at some point. I honestly do enjoy playing poker, though I'm not really good at it. I mean, it's mainly due to me not having a very good poker face. Which is a great segue into my number one favorite game played in 2024. Lindsay says Sea of Stars better be on my list. Well, is it? Well, since I don't really have much of a poker face, let's just move on and find out. Oh, and before I do, to each and every one of you who submitted their favorite games played in 2024 to be read on the show today, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to interact with me over on our social media pages. It was awesome reading what games were your favorite from this past year. I hope 2025 brings you and everybody else listening more awesome games, and I am anxious to talk about the next round of awesome gaming experiences we've all had next year. Number 1. My absolute favorite game that I played in 2024 is, in fact, the indie RPG masterpiece, Sea of Stars. Holy shit! Was this an amazing game and a memorable experience. And my love for this game isn't just with the game itself, but what came from actually playing it. Man, where do I even begin? If on the off chance you have not heard of this game before, Sea of Stars is a retro-inspired turn-based role-playing game that takes inspiration from several others in the genre, like Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, and Secret of Mana. Even though I've only ever played Super Mario RPG out of those three, and yes, I plan to rectify that as soon as possible, there was more than enough here to make me want to play this game. When it originally came out in August of 2023, all I kept hearing was resounding praise, and once I played it myself, I absolutely saw why. First, there was the retro-inspired graphics and visuals. Everything about the visual presentation was done wonderfully, from the look of the characters and the environments to the real-time lighting effects. The soundtrack, which was composed by Eric W. Brown, was masterfully done. Every single tune fits the moment or the mood, and it's a soundtrack that I still listen to today outside the game. The combat was very fun and very engaging. The combo abilities you learn, the ability to boost moves, and the timed button presses made even a basic battle a joy to partake in. But the real meat of the experience was the character-driven plot and how well the story was told. The developers really took the time to create a rich and detailed world, and it was populated by interesting characters who all developed over the course of the game in some meaningful way. As the game itself went on, I genuinely started to care about the people that I met and the characters that I controlled. So much so that when something bad happened to them, especially to one in particular, I felt genuine sadness. The funny thing about the whole experience was, in the beginning, the game wasn't actually hooking me like I was hoping it would. That's not to say I wasn't having a good time, I absolutely was. But some of the boss encounters were just cookie-cutter and predictable, and the game's overarching theme of friendship didn't really resonate with me, and it seemed like I was going to retread some similar storylines from games that I've played before. But man, when things got good, they got great with regards to the story and the world building. I was very eager to see what was going to happen next in the story. I certainly won't spoil anything, but the one thing that really stuck with me was how the game handled the ending. Sea of Stars has a standard ending, but if you put a little effort in, there's a quote-unquote true ending that you can achieve. Now, when I first heard of this, I rolled my eyes. I appreciate giving the player a little extra if they spend a little bit more time with the game, but that wasn't how it was at all. When I finished the game for the first time and figured out what I needed to do to get this true ending, I was honestly agitated at first. I needed to complete several quests and do other little things, all of which were pretty involved. But here's the thing. Doing all these extra things added more layers to the overall story and to the characters themselves, which was nice. But the actual payoff wasn't just another scene at the end of the game tacked on or anything stupid like that. The reward was not only meaningful, but the reward greatly expanded the conclusion of the game. And I don't know how best to say this without spoiling anything, but the game practically celebrated your extra efforts with you. The extra scenes felt like much more than just a reward for doing extra things. It made me feel as though I truly earned that wonderful ending, and I earned the celebration that came with it. As some of the new scenes played out, I remember smiling for long lengths of time, often having to consciously stop because my face actually started to hurt. Yes, it was all that damn good. The experience I had with Sea of Stars will always stick with me. And as far as things outside the game, I'll remember this game for the new things that I tried. When I got this game, friend of mine and fellow content creator Lindsay reached out to me, and we came up with the idea for us to play the game together as a way to hold each other accountable to its completion. Then we took a step further and decided to live stream check-ins with each other. I always wanted to do live streaming in some capacity, but was too afraid to take the plunge. Because we did this together, not only did I get to share an awesome gaming experience with somebody else, I got to try something new that put me out of my comfort zone. This game was the best thing that happened to me in 2024, and Sea of Stars will forever be one of my favorite video games because of it. And the developers have recently released downloadable content for this game. Absolutely free, I might add. So you bet your ass that at some point I'll be diving back into this game and experiencing some more adventure. If you like RPGs, games with good stories, or just great video games in general, I urge you to check this game out. I can guarantee that you will never forget your journey across the Sea of Stars. that brings us to the end of another episode, my friends. This has been episode 64 of the Retro Wildlands, my top 10 favorite games I played in 2024. Thank you all very much for tuning into the show today. 2024 was a great year for video games, and while I didn't play a ton of new games this past year, the ones I did play will leave a lasting impression. I hope your 2025 is a prosperous one, my friends, and I hope you all continue to work towards whatever goals you have your mind and your heart set on. If you like the show today and you want to show it and myself some support, please consider subscribing to the show on your preferred podcasting platform. The Retro Wildlands is part of the SuperPod Network, home of some awesome gaming podcasts and other gaming content, so you can follow us over there at superpodnetwork.com. Other than this show, you can check out other awesome podcasts such as the SuperPod Saga, Bar Silence, a video game music podcast, Retro Rehab, Remember 64, and many more. There's blog posts, videos, and tons of other content, so be sure to check it all out over at our website, superpodnetwork.com. Now, if you really like the show today and you have a few minutes to spare, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave the Retro Wildlands a good review on your podcast platform if you're able to do so. You can leave a star rating over on Spotify, but you can also leave ratings and written reviews over on iTunes, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, and Podbean, just to name a few. Good reviews will help circulate the show into more feeds, but more than anything, it'll let me know that you're liking what it is that I'm trying to do here, and it would mean the world to me if you had the time to spare and you could give us that good review. But as always, you are under no obligation to do any of this. Just the fact that you are listening to my show right now is much more than I could have ever asked for, so sincerely, above all else, thank you for being here. So, what's coming up next? If you happen to listen to episode 63, our Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater episode, you may remember me saying that the next thing was going to be a trip to an ice rink, as we checked out ice hockey for the original Nintendo. I still intend to cover that game, especially since it'll be a nice, short, and fun show. I just felt the urge to create another top 10 episode off the cuff, so I ended up pushing that one back. However, on our next episode, we should be back on track and we will partake in a little bit of ice hockey together. Well, unless something else catches my eye, who knows? The new year will certainly bring with it many surprises, so be sure to stick around. Whether you stay tuned for the next show or you head back in time and check out the slowly growing backlog of content, I hope you continue to hang out in the gaming wildlands with us, my friend. Nothing beats having company as we explore, and I can't wait until we set out in search of adventure once again. Until then, my friends, my name is Nomad, and you can find me roaming the Retro Wildlands.